Welcome everybody to the grind episode 3. I'm really excited to see all of you guys in the chat, getting ready to talk about some fantastic things happening in the Overwatch Path to Pro. Joining me today, we have 3 really awesome guests. Some of you may know incredibly well, some of you, or some may be new to you. So I'm going to give them the opportunity to tell them, or to tell you who they are and why we should care. So I'm going to start with Numlocked. Who are you and why should we care?
Hello, I'm Seb or Numlocked, and I'm a main tank for British Hurricane in Contenders, and I was previously on LA Valiant in Overwatch League.
Nice. Next up, TechGirl. Who are you and why should we care?
I'm TechGirl. I am the desk host for Overwatch Contenders Europe. I don't think you should care, but you know why you should care? Because if there's any mess behind me, I actually live with leg day during the season. So all the mess behind me, that's why you should care. That's all leg day stuff. So for his fangirls, yes, that is a dirty.
Very much a lie.
Oh my God. Hi, leg day from chat.
All the fangirls. Yay, I got them. There we go. Sorry.
Hey, leg day. All right, and finally, Maid. Who are you and why should we care?
You probably shouldn't care, let's be honest. But hey, I'm Maid. I'm the head coach of Second Wind in North American Contenders, and it is 7 a.m.
Wow, you're the real MVP, and I say that knowing that you are the person that debated the entire like South African Overwatch team, well, country, like the whole scene. You debated all of us and broke all of our hearts, hundreds of tens of people. How does that make you feel?
I apologize for that. I was not aware, but there was a South African scene, and I was just making a joke. I am now aware there is a South African scene, and I am forever sorry.
For those of you that don't know, basically what happened was Second Wind was making some teasers about who was going to be on their roster coming up, and they posted a South African flag. And of course, that got the entire South African Overwatch scene in a tiz, but no one knew we had a scene, and we pulled him into our Discord. We were like, hey, dude, what's up? And he was like, actually, sorry. No, it was a lie. I lied. So there you have it. Right, welcome guys. Thank you for joining me. First up on our list of topics, as you can see on the board, we've got the state of Overwatch, which is we're going to be discussing a little bit Seagull's video. For those of you that don't know, Seagull posted a video recently since he has now stopped playing professionally and has now taken on the role of a full-time streamer. He's now put out a video on the state of Overwatch comp and different heroes and things that he feels could be addressed by Blizzard. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Next up, we're going to talk about Numlocked, his path to pro, where he's been, where he's going, and how he's feeling about all of that. Then we're going to move on to TechGirl, and we're going to talk about the South African Overwatch scene because, yes, there is one. And finally, we're going to talk to Maid about the efficacy of the path to pro. So let's get started with the state of Overwatch. Now, a couple of topics that Seagull brought up in his video were things like ultimates being far too powerful, heroes that are just massive hard counters, which removes that whole thing of playing around a hero. You know, instead of being, trying to be big brain and trying to make these big plays to get around certain heroes, there are now these huge counters that just completely stop them in their tracks. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then things like maps and spawn advantage and how that can create a massive snowball effect. So I think, Maid, as a coach, I'm going to throw it to you first. These topics that Seagull has been talking about, what have been your views on it? Because there's been a lot of chatter in the Twitterverse, on Reddit. I just want to hear it from somebody that's got a little bit more clout.
So like I personally don't like hard counters. I feel like it cheapens the game experience, and I'd rather play around like individual skill and sort of like soft counters and being able to play a character rather than like just having to switch off a character just because, Brigitte, however you say it, no, that character's name is on the field.
Brigitte.
It's always Australians. It's Brigitte. It's Brigitte. I'm just joking.
There's a lot of words I can't pronounce, as my team can attest.
That's quite unfortunate. Numlocked, what about you? I'm assuming you know more or less about what was spoken about in the video. Let's talk a little bit more about, we've spoken about a little bit about hard counters, specifically Brigitte being such a hard counter to Tracer. But what about map spawn advantage, specifically on 2CP, and how the snowball effect can basically ruin a team? If you win that first fight, it's 64% of the time, according to Seagull, that's GG.
I mean, that doesn't just go for 2CP, though. It goes for King of the Hill as well. I think there's any, like, short, confined map where there's not a lot going on other than the 2 points that are super close to each other. That's always going to be an issue. I don't think there's much you can do about it other than making sure spawns are moved closer or further away, depending on what side you're on, or adjusting, how fast certain teams get ultimates, certain heroes get ultimates, that sort of thing. I don't think it's too much of an issue. Like, you don't really tend to see a lot of snowball happening in pro play. Maybe more so in rank, but at least not in pro play. I think it's more the opposite problem where you struggle with actually capping like the second point of a lot of maps. I think the snowball effect is an issue in King of the Hill where, the team that wins the first fight will generally win it because then they have the ultimate advantage and it's very easy to just cycle your ultimates and just win then. And again, that's where something like counter picks become a big part of retaking the point, because if you don't have the ultimate advantage, you need those counter picks. But as we're in a goats meta right now, it's a bit more difficult to deal with. That's a whole other issue. Yeah.
And speaking specifically about ultimate charge, there's been a discussion around ultimates being too powerful in the game at the moment and creating a little bit too much of an advantage, particularly support ults for what they do. Do you have thoughts on that?
I think it looks like they're stronger than they are right now just because of the meta room where a lot of teams are just playing goats. That means that supports aren't dying like at all, ever. So you'll have a Zen free farming and he's going to have his ultimate every fight. Same for Lucio. He's going to be in the midst of a tank fight. He's going to get his ult super quickly. So these supports look a lot stronger than they normally do because they go untouched. There's no one to keep them in check. There's no, they're not being dove by the Winston Doomfist or anything like that. So it looks a lot more ridiculous than it is at the moment. I don't think it's that big of an issue. I think, yeah, I wouldn't say that they're an issue. I think it's more the fact that we're stuck in not being able to play much but goats right now is the bigger issue, because Brig.
Yeah, pretty much. And obviously, I mean, we've got those big Brig changes coming in. She's going to have her shield bash damage reduced by 45, which means she can no longer do her little one-shot combo onto Traces and Genjis or any squishies, really. And they're going to increase her healing by 0.6 per second, which apparently, according to some chatter that I've heard, is actually massive.
It's huge, yeah. I don't think it's going to change anything, really. Goats is still going to get played. Like, it's probably going to shift more towards moats because it's going to be hard for Reinhardt's to be effective with their ultimate in Goats v Goats because the teams will either be spread out around corners with the support so far in the backline you can't hit those. There's going to be Zaryas with shields. The Reinhardt's going to have his own shield. The Brig's going to have her own shield. And if Brig can't stun that shield away from Reinhardt, then you're not really going to get the opportunity to Reinhardt. So it's more likely we'll start moving towards moats, which is obviously monkey goats, with less and less Ryan getting played because you're not going to get much use out of his ult.
Monkey goats. That's brilliant. There's been so many new acronyms coming through. Now, in response to this video, we had Seagull, Jane, and XQC and Chauffeur all talking together. And one of the things that has come out from that, especially from people like Slasher who've been tweeting, is this idea of solo and role queue. And I'd like to hear particularly Maid's opinion on this. As a coach, how do you think that would affect the players and how they play in competitive, having this like solo or potentially role queue?
Well, personally, I haven't played competitive in a few seasons myself. I think it's kind of hard. Like, I don't think there's any particularly good way that Blizzard could implement like a role queue. Role queue without actually sort of like putting like their sticker on like a particular meta or a particular lineup. Like Goats is obviously free, but like how do you split up role queue for competitive? Is it 2-2-2? Does that mean that Blizzard sort of supports a 2-2-2 style composition?
Yeah, it makes it quite difficult to get that flexibility that is the whole point of Overwatch. It's one of the biggest premises that was brought in when the game was released. You are able to freely pick and choose what heroes you play. But the counter argument is you could have maybe a soft role queue, or you could have maybe one slot. So a DP as a tank and a support and the rest fills. So do you think that there's any way at all that this could be implemented, or is it potentially just not a good idea?
I personally don't think it's a good idea. I'd much rather see like solo queue.
Yeah.
Sort of evening like the player field there by like having everyone by themselves rather than having group play.
Well, specifically for Numlocked, who's obviously playing at that incredibly high level, the idea of solo queue, I know that there's a little bit of a stigma behind stacking because it's seen as like free SR, but at the same time, there's the thing of wanting to play with your friends. I mean, this is after all a game. You still want to enjoy it. You still want to have fun. So, do you think that that's something that perhaps the top level would appreciate a lot more than, I mean, because the top 500, that's like a percentage, if even, of the total number of players of Overwatch. The other 99.999% of players possibly wouldn't enjoy it that much. So do you think that solo queue would be a solution, or perhaps from a particular ranking, or how do you think it would work, and how do you think it could work?
I would personally love it to take a similar route to League of Legends, where it's split between like solo queue and like flex queue sort of thing, where you can queue with as many people as you want. The only issue I could see with that is that at the very top of Overwatch and ranked, you would see like there'd be even less games, right? Because obviously right now there's still the issue of sometimes having masters on your team being a big SR difference from like anywhere from 4K to like 4.6K, where you're just not having people on your team that are of a similar SR to you. So they create a even bigger divide, and probably even break ranked and have like 15, 30, 45-minute queues, which isn't exactly ideal. I could see people at the top of SR being happy with the solo queue enforced, because I don't think that grouping and stacking is a big issue at lower SR. I don't think it's necessarily free wins then. Like, you're still going to have bad players if they just want to play with their friends. But a high SR, like generally if you have pro stacking, like it's a free win, more or less. Like, you give them the heroes they want, you let them play the game, you listen to them, like you'll win the game, sort of thing,
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
So I think stacking is only an issue really at a high level, but you can't really enforce solo queue, because then there's just a divide in what people will play, and then there's not going to be enough games to go around.
That makes sense. And we talk about pro players doing particularly well, and that comes down to things like scoreboards and stats. And there's been a big divide there because, like when you're playing in gold, for example, and you've got that guy on May, and you're like, dude, May isn't really working. They've got a Farah. You're being pretty hard counted. Would you mind swapping off? And he's like, nah, fam, gold damage, gold elims.
I hate this so much. Overwatch. I feel like Overwatch is like everybody's first FPS, and everyone's kind of just babied into being. Everyone's just kind of babied and spoon fed into being able to play whatever they want by not really being given the information that they should have, or would like push them away from what they enjoy playing into something that would help win the game. Like, any other competitive game I've ever played in my life, and I've played a lot. Like, this is the third game I've played professionally. Like, I've never had such little information available to me while trying to play competitively. It's ridiculous.
But I mean, do you think that it doesn't open up that window for people to like press tab or whatever the shortcut would be?
Shit talk
and
them?
like,
That happens anyway. That happens anyway. It doesn't matter. Like, having stats is not going to change it. Like, that happens in any other game as well. Like, it happens now with just medals. It happens in League of Legends with stats. Like, that's not. It's the internet. There's anonymity. Like, people are going to call each other shit no matter what.
That's fair.
Maid, at least you can do it more accurately with
Yeah, exactly.
More accurate shit talking. That's exactly what Overwatch needs. Oh, nice. So overall, I think what I really want to find out from you guys is, do you agree with Seagull's assertion of the state of Overwatch at the moment? Do you think that these things that he's proposed could make a difference? Or do you think it's just like another guy moaning because he's been playing pro for so long, now he's playing ranked, and it's like, well, welcome to ranked, buddy.
I'd say. Oh,
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
You go.
No, you
all right. Fuck. Is that going? All right. I'd agree with him in part. Like, I agree with like certain things. I think like ranked could be approached better. I think more stats would be good in both competitive and matchmaking. I don't know if I necessarily agree with his assertions about like ultimates, but I also didn't watch Jane's like pro pug stuff with reduced ultimate charge or whatever.
Mhm.
I saw the pro pugs and it was like an absolute mess. Like I'm not too sure like how I feel about ults being changed. Because it's already been nerfed the build duration like a couple of years ago when the game was first in beta and like just released. It was absolutely crazy how quickly you build your ult. So and the pro pugs I watched when the ults were just passive building, like I think in one Li Jiang control center game, only the Reinhardt and the Winston got their ultimate. No one else got ultimate. And if you head that direction, then that takes away, counter picks even more, which is an awful direction for Overwatch in general because the game is entirely based around counter picking, which is why one tricking Maid with gold damage are bad. But so like I could see them potentially being touched a little bit, but I think it's very meta dependent as well how quickly you're able to get ults because I don't think this issue is as big of an issue. Generally, or has been an issue. It's only right now when supports have ultimates constantly because then it feels like nothing can be done in these team fights.
I agree with Numlocked in this one though. I do think it's more the meta, and I think when the meta changes, you'll see the decisions will change. But this is kind of how these this is all games work like this. The developers come in, they change the meta. The idea is that you have to adapt, and sometimes you're gonna hate it, and then it'll change out. So I feel like as much as everyone's complaining now, and yes, GOAT sucks, like give it a couple of months and we'll be complaining about something else.
Oh, I mean, like, I'd say the thing is, like, you should be allowed to complain about this stuff if you don't like it, and like, feedback is what changes the game. So this,
I mean, we
this
say that, but we had
conversation.
Mercy meta for was it 6 months,
Too
7
long.
months? It was a long
Yeah,
time.
I don't know what happened there.
It was a long time.
I wonder though, do you ever think, because sometimes I do think that those developers, like as much as we're giving them feedback, I wonder if they ever sit in a room and are just like, oh, you know what, stuff these guys. I have a great idea for the next 3 months. It's going to drive them mad. Like Mercy meta, let's go type of thing. I sometimes wonder. I feel like if I was working on this game, I might do that just for a giggle. Like all I'm saying.
The problem is they can't cater to us, like they have to they're catering towards the general public that play the game, not towards the whatever percentage we are. So like although we have a strong opinionated voice that generally has a good direction on where the game should be headed, for better or worse, they can't always listen to us because without the general public playing the game, there wouldn't be a pro scene.
Yeah. And the thing that concerns me when you talk about the general public is obviously now we've the whole thing about the hashtag delete brig movement. Like, how much traction do you think that that's actually going to pick up, guys? Do you think Blizzard will actually bow to the lower ranked masses and just completely delete Brigida?
No. When has that ever worked?
Never.
I can't even recall a time that a company has deleted a character from a game because it's been deemed overpowered. It also
League
sets
of
a weird
Legends.
precedent. I don't think League has ever done that.
I think they disabled a character for a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah,
because of, like,
disabling a character is different though. Like like if it's buggy or whatever to make changes to it, or if it's too overpowered and they can't put a hotfix out, they'll disable it. Yeah, but Overwatch has never done that sort of thing, and I can't see it ever doing that sort of thing. Like we've had characters that have been issued before, and it's taken a while for us to get hotfixes out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's quite silly, the whole thing. But I believe that if they make enough noise, at the very least, Blizzard will sit up and pay attention. So we'll have to see how that works out going forward. Next thing that I would love to talk about, and this is something that's been a little bit of a buzz in parts of the pro scene, mostly due to Maid, and that is the South African scene. So we did touch on it a moment ago. And what happened, I told the whole story, but then Maid went and put our Discord on Twitter, and we had a massive influx of international people just coming to join. Coaches, managers, there's even like a sports therapist, players. It's been absolutely huge. Everybody's really excited. We've even changed the name of, it used to be CalZA with an S, and now we've changed it, it's pending, changed to CalZA because people don't know that SA and ZA are like two different things. So it's actually it's made such a huge impact on us. And I think the best person to talk to about the South African scene, not just in Overwatch, but in esports in general, is definitely TechGirl. obviously she's representing us now in Contenders. What has that been like? Let's just start there. How is it being in Kiev in this wonderful weather, really just representing South Africa on the Overwatch stage?
What I find funny is I'm now in my 3rd season, so I've been on this desk for 2 seasons, and it took an Australian for them to pay attention to South African Overwatch, because they spend all their time in the Twitch chat, everyone watching Contenders, saying I'm from Australia. So thank you, Maid. It took an Australian to make people pay attention. No, I mean, being here has been amazing. Obviously, it's freezing cold, so in South Africa, super hot. So this has been a little bit strange, but I mean, this experience has been incredible. Before Overwatch, I mainly did other titles, so it was Dota and CS. So coming here, having to learn about Overwatch for Contenders, understanding the community, and ultimately from that, getting to learn about the South African community has been incredible. I think that's the best part, is just seeing how passionate people are about this game. Like, CS players are passionate, but they got nothing on Overwatch players.
That's actually true. And especially in South Africa. I mean, something that I've noted about the South African Overwatch scene is just how scrappy they are. We came from having like 8 teams or something to a really thriving community that is making their own like really small fun tournaments. There was a pug tournament the other day where they just had people mashed into teams randomly from across various different teams. And I mean, there was no I don't think there was a big prize or whatever. There was like a small little sponsored prize, but it was mainly just for fun and just to get the word out there. And I think Maid will attest to the fact that South Africans are pretty cool people as well.
Yeah, they're pretty all right.
Yeah, Maid actually that made him feel even worse for debating the whole country. I'm never gonna let you live that down, man.
I'm sorry.
So Sam, TechGirl, sorry. Uh, what do you think are the biggest challenges that the South African scene are currently facing in terms of Overwatch and growth and development?
I'm going to be very controversial here, but I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I want to be honest. I think that the South African scene, unfortunately, is just extremely small. We don't have the player base that other areas do. And that's what it comes down to. And I do think that having such a small player base becomes a problem, because ultimately you only have a very select few who are trying to be super competitive. It means that you have a very big skill gap between the top teams and someone playing in 4th place, all of that. So like, for me, that's the biggest problem. I don't think South Africans realize how small our region is at all, and understand like how tiny it is. I know, like, especially in Overwatch, we push all the time, and I've kind of stopped now where it was like, oh, we should get servers. And then I kind of realized how small the community was, and I've been playing a little bit of Call of Duty, and we have South African servers, and it sucks because there's just not enough people playing, and like, you're playing the same people every day. And we saw it with Dota and CS, they got servers and the skill level dropped. So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest barrier to entry for South Africa is just that we have such a small player base, which is fascinating because geographically we're quite a big country.
Well, I mean, that brings it down to that whole circular catch-22 of, well, if we had local servers, more people would play. Do you think that that's like an absolute fallacy, or do you think that there is some merit to that?
I think it's an absolute fallacy. I just don't think that servers are going to make the difference. I've seen it with, I mean, like I said, Call of Duty is a really good example right now. Black Ops is a sick game, but just because we have servers hasn't made more people buy the game, and you're playing the same people all the time in games. And if there's someone who's rubbish, then when they come into the game that they're rubbish. If there's someone who's really good, everyone tries to jump out of that game because that person's really good. And I don't think dedicated servers are going to do the community well. I think what we need is more game time with international players, which I understand there's a ping issue or whatever, but like, the very small competitive community needs to have more competition with outside players and teams to try and improve. Servers is just going to make us even smaller, and it's going to seclude us even more.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you talk about the ping issue. Correct me if I'm wrong, Maid, but I believe that Australia doesn't have their own servers either. So there's also
well, we actually do, amazingly, despite having a smaller population than South Africa. We actually do have our own dedicated Overwatch servers.
Oh my word, that's so unfair.
Well, I think it comes down to, it might be a smaller population, but I bet you they have more players. And I think this is the big.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to say with certainty.
But again, I feel like very small region, and now we're like, hey, can we please have really special treatment, and can you spend lots of money on like making solutions specifically for us? So like that makes no sense in a business sense, but I kind of feel like that would help us a lot.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, especially we've got our VS Gaming, we call it a league, and it's a bunch of different titles, about 9 different titles that we compete in over the year, 4 legs over the course of the year that ends in a LAN at the end of the year. And if we could have local custom servers purely for that, it would actually be huge. We have pugs once a week in our local Discord. I think that could make a massive difference. Although, obviously, once you go back onto like if you have the local servers and you're playing on like 20 ping or whatever, and you go back onto the EU servers, you're going to have like 150 again, which could be problematic. But for the most part, I think it would actually make a massive difference for us.
I agree, but
Yeah.
also, I mean, maybe, I don't know, before we go and ask Blizzard for custom servers, we should check their tournament license agreements where like it specifically says you can't call your tournament a league and not call it a league. I don't know. Like there's so many little things that we need to fix internally, I think, before we start looking externally. So like, yes, I agree we need custom servers, but I think internally we, as the community itself is really passionate. I worry that the tournament organizers are not part of that community. So from what I've seen, the guys that are now trying to arrange tournaments, while all very good, they don't play Overwatch. They don't have people working there that understand Overwatch, and we need more people that actually understand the game to come in and start running these events. I don't know, maybe. I've just pissed off a lot of people that work in South African esports, and I'm sorry.
It had to be said. It had to be said. And speaking of ways that we can, get the South African name out there, Maid has already done a great job starting that off. We've got a bunch of stuff coming up that I think, TechGirl, you've got the down low on all of the things that are going to be happening over the next year in ZA Overwatch. Could you give us a little bit of a rundown of what we can be expecting?
Well, I know that VS is going to continue with their league. I know I gave them a hard time calling it a league, but it is a really it's a fantastic tournament, and it gets a lot of support, and it helps all the players to play every week, which I think is really important. Also, it's so interesting because they spend a huge amount of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars at the end of the year on their CS and their Dota productions. The Overwatch community did the final production by themselves. I think it was all of 3-4 people, and it had more viewers than the 100,000 Rand production. So that was fantastic. That's a really good one. Attack Shack, which is a cool location in Cape Town. I think that they also sponsor an Overwatch team that does really well. They're going to be doing a bunch of matches to showcase not only their venue, but also showcase some of the top teams in the country. Medal State, which is a tournament organizer that I've done a lot of work with over the years. They've hinted that something's coming. I actually know what's coming.
Yeah,
but I can't say.
Leaks.
And if I leak that, no. I never leak. But some cool stuff is coming from them, which I think will be really exciting. And they're really trying to make sure that they do this the right way. I know they've actually been chatting to Blizzard, so they're going to make sure that this is done the right way. And then I know there's also some conversations about getting some sort of like show matches going, so we can get our teams to play some international teams, which I think would actually be really fun. It'll be a good way as well for the local players to obviously not only show what they're worth, but learn from those overseas players. So those should be pretty epic to look out for.
Nice. So we will, once this video gets posted up onto YouTube, we will have all the information about all those things, as well as a link to the South African Discord for anybody that wants to join us. We are a pretty damn cool bunch of people. Myself and TechGirl are there, so I mean that should convince you already. Maid is there as well. Like, I feel like you all should be joining that. So we will post a link to that as soon as this goes up onto YouTube. And now let's just move on quickly to. We're going to take this back to Numlocked. I know he's spoken a lot in the first segment, which is great because having that player perspective is absolutely fantastic. Now I want to talk about not a general state of Overwatch, but about you specifically. You mentioned that you were on the LA Valiant for a long time, but you were on the bench. I don't think you got to play a single game, and now you are starting lineup for British Hurricanes. So tell us a little bit about your story. Where did you start? How did this all come to be? We want to know, where did you come from?
Okay, that's a long story.
Nice.
But
popcorn.
I'll shorten it to I started playing professionally around like 16 years old. I started playing TF2, and very quickly I became like one of the best players to play the game in my role. I joined up a team with a couple of now Overwatch players, Nox, who used to play for Eagle, Mike, who played for British Hurricane and UK World Cup. And we were like unbeaten for like 2 years in that game. I played it for a total of 7 years. I then moved on to League of Legends, where I played professionally there as well. I played in the UK scene. I played in the Turkish scene for a bit. And then when Overwatch got announced, I decided to talk with my TF2 guys again. And we are like, hey, this game's coming out. It's a lot like TF2. We should play it. We'll probably be pretty good at it. Got beta access, started playing that game. And then kind of ever since then, I've been playing around with tier 1 teams. Like my first team was called Creation Esports, who went on to become Dignitas. And then I joined NRG, and we all know how that went. And from then I kind of had to go on a redemption arc because NRG was a complete shit show. I went into Contenders after playing in tier 1 for a long time. Ended up getting 3rd, 4th in Contenders, playing pretty well. And from that, LA Valiant wanted to pick me up after trying out with them. Then LA Valiant was weird. I'll leave it at that unless we want to go into more detail on the whole LA Valiant escapade.
And now you're in British Hurricanes.
Now I'm British Hurricane, playing the game, yeah.
Nice. That must feel good to spend an entire season on the bench. Now you get to actually do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, okay, I won't lie. Like the whole LA Valiant thing was depressing as fuck. Like, when I originally signed to them, I was under the impression, so my agents, that I'd be contesting for the main spot. There'd be split scrim time. We'd be splitting stuff like that to contest for stage time. And then I don't really know what happened. I was away for like the first month of preseason practice because I was waiting for my visa, and obviously I didn't get any scrim time at all. Then they were just playing with fate, and then when I got back, I had some scrim time, but it slowly became less and less and less, to the point where across the entire year of Overwatch League, I had a total of 3 weeks of scrim time, and that's main team and sister team included.
Wow.
Around the time of the mid-season transfer window, I wanted to be released from Valiant. Like, I wasn't happy anymore. I wasn't scrimming at all. Like, I felt like I was just kind of dying away as a player. Like, I was shying away from just the spotlight in general. Like, kind of before Valiant, I was a pretty outspoken player. I was like kind of happy, like being in the general eye, the public's eye, and just kind of doing my thing and playing the game. And I'm a fairly happy. I was a very happy person. But as soon around the mid-season time, I was depressed. Like, the last few months of Overwatch League, I didn't leave my room at all. I was in a pretty bad spot. They told me not to leave. That things are going to get better around the time of the mid-season. They said that they would be working on the sister team. They'd try and make that happen. Well, not try. They said they promised they'll make it happen. They did finally pick up a couple of people, but then as soon as they arrived, they had to send them off. They sent them off for visas because they were worried they'd have to use them in the last stage of Overwatch League. So we didn't actually get to scrim at all with them. And then the time to be released came. I got called in for a meeting near the end of the season, just to let know, which Noah didn't turn up to, by the way. I didn't see him. And yeah, they basically said that, look, the season's been really shit for you. We feel like you probably resent us, and we'd rather let you go and let you try and find a new team where you can be happier, and not play for a team that you don't like anymore. So we basically just parted ways.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's rather tumultuous. And I can imagine how that would have been really upsetting for you. But I think that it's really exciting that you're now, so you haven't like fallen suddenly into obscurity, right? So that can happen to a lot of players where they leave an Overwatch League team and suddenly never heard from again. You've been picked up straight away.
I mean, I was worried that was going to be the case for me, because like, who wants a player that hasn't scrimmed for a year? I'm very out of practice compared to all these Contenders players that have been practicing for an entire year. They're very caught up on the meta. Like, it got to a point with Valiant where I wasn't even able to watch the scrims because there was so much support stuff for each Overwatch League team that there wouldn't be enough spectator slots. So I ended up not even being able to watch the scrims, so I couldn't keep up to date on the meta or anything like that. I was really out of it, you know.
Jeez.
So come the time that I was being released and having to try out for these new teams, I had like a whole year of catching up to basically, because I was behind every other player that's trying out.
Just as a matter of interest, though, do you think that there are other players that were sitting in OWL who are in situations where they ended up feeling the same way? And I mean, did you feel any resentment towards the rest of the team being sort of feeling so locked out like that?
Not really, but I never really felt like part of the team. Like I didn't feel close to any of the players really, because I was never like I didn't even go to campus, to the practice facility. Like I never showed up anymore. Like what was the point? It was so hard going to like these fan meetups and to practice and seeing the team practice, or fans saying like, "Oh, can't wait to see you play. Hope you'll get your chance soon," or like saying things like, "Oh, you know, you're still part of the team even if you're not playing." Like, because they don't know the full story. They don't know that I'm not doing anything behind the scenes, and it was literally just like breaking my heart. Not like being told things like that and knowing the truth, you know. So I just wanted to get out and be able to like actually all I want is to play the game. Like I don't mind being a bench player. That I have literally no issue with that. It's just literally the fact that I wasn't playing the game at all, because it's all I've known, you know.
I also think it must be really hard because you leave your friends, your family, you're in a whole different country. You want to do like you're living. I mean, that's what everyone. So it's the dream. You're the pro player. You're in the house. Like you're in Overwatch League, and you're literally like you said, you're not leaving your room, and you're sitting doing anything that you think I'm doing.
It was depressing as fuck. Like I honestly hated life the majority of this year, because I didn't really have a direction anymore. Like basically since I was 16, I've always had like a focus and a goal and something I was working towards, and within my career that is. And then suddenly I don't have that anymore. I just spent an entire year kind of twiddling my thumbs, waiting around, hoping I'll finally get a chance. And I'm not even given the chance and the opportunity to do anything, you know? Like I just had to kind of wait and hope things would get better, and they never did, and I just get released, and then I suddenly have to fight and try and make sure I can actually get on the team. Because the other thing as well is that I'm 25 years old. I'm an old player. I'm an old player that's not played for a year. Like there's gonna not be much interest. So I'm very grateful and appreciative of having a team that took a chance on me. You know, the same thing happened last year for Overwatch League. Envision were the only team that were interested in me after the NRG debacle, and you know that paid off. Things worked out for them. Things worked out for me. And I'm in the same situation now, basically, where I need to prove myself again, because I know like people have written me off, or people have forgotten about me entirely because I've not done anything for the last year. So I need to prove myself again, and I'm happy to do that. I'm confident in myself.
You've just like broken the hearts of literally everyone in chat.
I think though, I mean, and it's a really sad story, and like when you were saying it now, like I felt this, like I obviously felt the pang of sadness. I'm still gonna give you a hard time if I ever have to interview on the desk again, but that's besides the point. Like I felt that, but then I was also like, I wish we had more of these stories, because I think that the biggest problem, and it kind of ties into the South African scene conversation as well, but I think it's just in general, is people have this like very magical view of how this works and what being a professional esports player or a professional esports broadcaster or whatever else is. And it's all they see is what they watch on the Twitch stream, which is the lights and the stage and the magic. And obviously, like, they're seeing Numlocked standing there smiling with his jersey on. They don't see all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. And unfortunately, it's professional sports at the end of the day. I mean, this stuff, it has to happen like this. It sucks, but it does. And I was like, I think it's great that you can tell your story, because I do think more people need to understand how hard it is to be where you are and to play at that level, and the strain it can put on you mentally. Because
I mean, a lot of players are scared to tell their story though, because it can burn bridges, and you know that's a very dangerous thing to do in this career. I mean, me even talking about this stuff, right? I had like I can't remember how many pages it was, but a literal essay written out that I wrote on the plane back from LA to England, because I had so much time on my hands, and I just wanted to get my thoughts out. And I just decided against posting it at the time, and I still don't think I will ever post it, because it's just not a good idea to get everything out there and talk about how bad the experience was. Like, I appreciate that they looked after me, they gave me a place to stay, and they paid me and all that kind of stuff, but like the money I literally couldn't give a fuck about. Like, I want to play the game, that's it.
Well, we've got a couple questions that have just come through from chat, so let's dive into those. It's the first time we're doing any sort of a Q&A type thing. So guys, if you do have questions, please just post them in chat. If we have a chance, I'll get to them. So let's quickly just do these ones. This first question comes from Thibble Dork, who's a really awesome journalist. And he's asked, with all the hurdles in your way, what made Hurricane take a shot on you? Did you impress them in scrims, or what was it about you that made them go, yeah, let's give this guy a chance?
I think I impressed them in tryouts. Yeah, like I played, I think probably just under a week with them. Played some scrims with them. They liked that, and then they wanted to see me in. I played the last 2 matches of Contenders Trials with them because they were pretty. I think potentially concerned that I would maybe choke in officials because it's been such a long time since I played that no one really knows what I'm like in officials anymore. But I mean, I played in the Contenders Trials with them, and I think 3-1 and 4-0 the 2 games, and I played the same as I did in the tryouts, so they were very happy.
Nice. Next question coming through from Sifit. He's our social media guy. Great guy. He says, were you restricted via your Valiant contract to play on non-Overwatch League teams?
So, not restricted by the contract, but generally it was that's not a good idea to do sort of thing. Like there was a point where I wanted to tweet out saying, hey, if anyone needs a sub to play for them in scrims or whatever, let me know. I'm not doing anything, And if that tweet goes out, then there's going to be questions aimed towards Valiant about what's going on behind the scenes exactly. And just creates a bunch of bad PR for them. Like there were a lot of times where I wanted to put tweets out where I was advised by the PR manager for Valiant that not to do that would be a bad idea for me and for the team, blah, blah, blah. So there were a lot of times where I just had to kind of hold back on what's really going on and just kind of act like everything's okay. Like there was at one point mid-season where I had that like outbreak on stream where I just like people kept asking me stuff and I could not answer it anymore. It's getting a bit ridiculous. There, it got to a point where I just wanted to stop. I didn't want to stream anymore because people were asking so much, and I just kind of got fed up with it.
Makes a lot of sense. And I mean, obviously, you don't want to divulge that kind of information. You don't want to create that drama, especially because if you start creating drama, any potential teams would be like, well, we don't want this guy. He just makes drama.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the next 3 questions, one of them was aimed specifically at Numlocked, but all 3 of them, I'm going to aim them at all of our guests because they're pretty general questions, and I think that everybody would have something to say on each of them. So the first one, and I myself am actually quite curious about this as well. We'll start with Numlocked, Maid, TechGirl. What are your thoughts on Torbjorn?
Okay, the guy asking that is a big troll from my stream. And he's a very big Torbjorn fan. Torbjorn sucks. He's an awful hero. That's his response. That's the response he gets.
Maid?
Torbjorn is only useful for taking it off the map.
What?
Not that I would ever take it off the map or pick Torbjorn.
That is a heavy, hectic hot take. Sam, TechGirl, I don't know if you know too much about the Torbjorn changes. Have you seen those changes? Have you seen his new molten core? Like, what have you thought of that? Have you seen it at all?
I think he's horrible.
Very nice.
That's all
okay,
I'm
we've
say.
actually... Sorry to cut you off there. We've actually had a lot of questions coming in. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to have a Q&A at the end, just a quick Q&A, because otherwise we're going to get way too sidetracked. But I am really excited at everybody putting in all of these questions. So please keep the questions coming in, and I will try and get through as many as possible at the end of the segment. We still have another topic that we do need to get through, and that is the efficacy of the Path to Pro system. And that is basically, for anyone that isn't sure about how Path to Pro works, if you go onto like the Path to Pro website, it's like, buy the game, get to level 25, play competitive, right? That's your starting point. Then they urge you to join the open division. For those of you that don't know, the name is as it suggests, it is open. Anybody can enter. You just need a team of at least 6 players. If you play 8 of your 10 games, you get Blizzbucks. Then
What's a Blizzbucks?
Blizzbucks are amazing, to be honest. I'm gonna buy Call of Duty with Blizzbucks. Anyway, so if you make the top 16 teams, if I remember correctly, you go through to the playoffs. The top teams from playoffs then go through to Contenders trials. And if you make it through trials, then you get to play in Contenders proper. And that's basically where scouting happens. It's not the only place that scouting happens. Scouting can happen at any point during that time. But well, this is the question we're asking. Is Contenders the place where you are most likely to get noticed? So let's just talk about how effective is this path to pro?
I think the World Cup is the place you're most likely to get picked up. I honestly think Contenders doesn't matter that much to, or it doesn't seem to matter that much to these scouts. Like, there is some talent looking from Contenders, but if you pop off at World Cup, that's going to generate way more hype around you as a player, because no one really watches Contenders. Like, there are scouts that watch Contenders, but
I definitely agree with that. I think to some extent that's sort of due to how Contenders itself works, and also just sort of like how it's been publicized. I think it, like, also to note, it's like it's very, very hard to like talk about this topic since you're gonna be sort of like respectful in terms of like how Blizzards run things. You can't be unwarrantedly critical of what they've done.
That makes a lot of sense. Obviously, being a coach for a currently participating Contenders team, it is a little bit of a sticky topic. But let's talk about the pros of the path to pro. So, obviously, I mean, we've seen it with a player like Numlocked, who started in some random game, however many years ago, and has built his way up into playing for previously an Overwatch League team and now a Contenders team. We're seeing it with the players that are playing in Contenders now, especially being with Broadcast.gg. We've done a lot of the broadcasting for Open Division and for Contenders Trials EU. And so watching the player progression from Open Division all the way through to Contenders and seeing some of those Contenders Trials players playing in the World Cup, like, is it working? Is the path to pro creating pros? I think that's the big question on everybody's lips.
I think
Go first.
it's difficult for me to answer because I'm kind of a weird case where the path to pro never really applied to me. Like I said, this is the third year I'm playing professionally, so it's very easy for me to, especially because I've played since the very beginning of beta. It's very easy for me to come in and be instantly among the top players, and I've just kind of stayed there since the start of the game. Whereas there are players that has applied to before path to pro was really like designated a thing. Like someone, well, basically any Contenders player from season 1 of Contenders last year that has now ended up in Overwatch League. Like players like, I can't think of any names right now, but I think it's definitely applied. It definitely has applied there because that was the main scouting grounds back then for Overwatch League.
Nice. So what we're saying is that the path to pro is something that players should be, I mean, basically, like, you shouldn't be trying to skip the queue and hope that by playing like grinding comp every single day is going to get you on a World Cup team, basically. you should be doing these tournaments, the Open Division, and then getting through to Contenders Trials and Contenders, and hopefully working your way up to World Cup and ultimately Overwatch League.
I think it's very difficult to skip the queue in a game like Overwatch, where the ranked ladder and ranked environment is a lot different from the actual professional environment. So you could be top 10 on ladder, but that might not transition into professional play, and you're not going to be able to play in the same way, have the same carry effect that you would in ranked. So generally, like, the only way you're going to be able to do it is through working up through the path to pro, playing on like Contenders academy teams and whatnot. And obviously that's a lot easier to do in NA, I think, because there's more exposure there and there's more academy teams. It's a lot harder to stay on the path to pro in Europe because of how few positions are paid, I think, because of the lack of academy teams.
I do think, though, this is for any esports. In order to have a thriving tier 1 scene, you have to have a thriving tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. Like, you've got to have sort of all these various levels, because that ultimately players, but I do think we need to remember that Overwatch as a competitive esport is still in its infancy. So the path to pro is really important. I think we'll see it change though over the next few years. And I mean, like Numlocked mentioned, the European scene not having as many contenders, not having as many academy teams. But when the league expands, that could potentially change. So there's, I think that this is just one of those things where it's still in its infancy. It still has to grow. It's not perfect yet. I'd like to see more outside tournament organizers being allowed access to that tier 2 and tier 3 scene. But again, I understand with Overwatch League, there has to be a huge amount of control on that. But I feel like if that was a little bit more open to other tournament organizers, we could help build that even more. And that concept of path to pro would speed up a lot more as well.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And-
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Okay, my personal opinion that as sort of like you getting players noticed, I think the way Contenders works at the moment is very inefficient. I think that like having 2 chances a year in 2019 to sort of get yourself into Contenders and get yourself noticed is very low. I'd much rather see like a more tournament style structure than the league structure. I think leagues are really, really inefficient and outdated in esports.
Right. So basically, what we've done is we've gone from 3 seasons to 2 seasons, and what we're saying is we should be having more of them, more opportunities for players to get noticed. Because okay, so you obviously, as we've mentioned a couple times, you do coach a Contenders team. So when you are looking for players, where do you start? What are your channels? So how often are you looking at like open division players?
Very little. I mean, like it depends. Like we definitely had to scout from like open players this season, coming into Contenders, because like as a trials team, it's very hard to sort of get Contenders players to notice you if you don't sort of have that guaranteed spot. But I think like it's a lot safer just to take players from Contenders and players with that like prior high level experience.
So that's the flip side. Players trying so hard to get noticed, it can also be an issue for teams themselves to get noticed by high level players.
I don't know so much though. If you look at European Contenders, and I do agree with Maid, you tend to see the same players recycle. But then every so often a new name will pop up in the season. And if they're good, within like 2 weeks, one of the big teams has come in and poached them and destroyed the smaller team's chances. But so you do, every so often you do see this gem come in and you see them get picked up by someone else. So I do think it happens. I just don't think it happens as much because ultimately as well, you've got to remember that these two, the tier, for want of a better term, the tier 2 players, especially for Contenders in Europe, where like they're not getting paid and only a few of them are actually earning a salary, like they want to make money. They want to win those games because ultimately that's the only source of income they're getting. So are you going to take a risk on an unknown player without much competitive experience, or are you just going to pick up the guy that you've known forever, that he's played on different teams? There's also, again, it's this infancy that we're sitting in, and I feel like when there's more money coming into the tier 2 scene for players and for teams and more academy teams, maybe that'll change a bit. But right now, people are also trying to protect the small amounts of cash that they make at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Cash flow has been a huge issue with tournament organizers, and like prize pools have been shrinking, or not shrinking, but being redistributed. So higher prize pools for winning teams, which then lowers the amount of money that a second or third or lower place team can win from these leagues and stuff, and it's creating a bit of a divide. And I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the amount of time, energy, and money that's being put into Overwatch League is steadily creating a massive divide between tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3. But we're getting to a point where tier 1 is like all there is, and tier 2 and tier 3 are kind of fading into, that's where your niche hardcore diehard fans are going to be. we're building our scene, and it is steadily growing. Our Discord has, I think, over 700 members at the moment, which isn't a lot, but it is when you consider that at the beginning of the year, I think we had maybe 150. So us putting in that effort and trying extra hard is what is eventually going to get us noticed. And I'm really happy to see that in the Overwatch or the Battle.net launcher, they've been advertising Contenders. I think we reached a peak of like 13,000 viewers for EU yesterday or the day before. So Blizzard is definitely making strides in the right direction. So I'm excited to see
Sure.
how they're going to be doing, like how they're going to be helping to grow their visibility for the tier 2 and the tier 3 scenes. And I think that kind of brings us to the end of our scheduled topics for the evening. So sorry for everybody that's been watching. We have had some like crazy technical difficulties. Hopefully the VOD itself should have recorded fine. So once it's up on YouTube, all of these problems should have ironed themselves out. And I think what we're going to do now is quickly have a look at the questions that have come through for the guests before we kind of wrap it up. So let's see here. One of the questions I had was, and this is a pretty cool one, and I think this came from a South African, and it's rooted in one of the international people that has recently joined the South African Discord is somebody that works in mental health in esports, not just esports in general, but helping with the players as well. And the question is, again, for all of you, what are your thoughts on mental health care in the Overwatch League?
I think there's a couple of teams that are kind of heading in the right direction. We're trying to ensure there's someone to look after the players in that regard. I know Valiant honestly don't do too bad a job on this. They have a mental health coach. They have a physical therapist as well on hand. The only issue there was that I didn't really feel I could open up or talk with the mental health coach because he's part of the Valiant staff, and I didn't have a lot of good stuff to say about that. So I found it difficult to really connect with him. I know that Gladiators, although they've released him now, they had someone of a similar role as well. So I think some teams, and hopefully going forward, there'll be more, but some teams are aware that it was going to be a necessity, and they'll continue to work towards having that as kind of a requirement for the league, because it is stressful. Whether you're starting, whether you're on the bench, it's kind of a whole new world to a lot of these players where they're suddenly more exposed, not only as players but as people, to the community, and it's something that takes a lot of adjustment, and that these people will struggle to adjust to. So it's good to have someone to open up to and kind of guide you through it, and to be able to, I think, just being able to express yourself and your thoughts and concerns about that sort of thing will help a lot of these players.
Anybody else?
I mean, I think it just goes with what Numlocked said at the end of the day. OWL, this is about professional athletes. You'll find that most big sports teams have an entire team of people who are there to look after your health. I do think that makes story and kind of, I think, having a better understanding of where he's at. I do think it's difficult if you're in a house like that to have to speak to the team psychologist, if you like, because ultimately the psychologist you feel is being paid by your team, so you don't really want to say, actually, I'm having a bit of a breakdown and I don't know if I can perform, or I'm not happy here, because you don't know if that information goes back. So maybe that's something for the teams to look at and to try and understand. That could possibly be it. But I do think most of them are probably going to go that way. And especially when you've got this many players coming in from all over the world, having to live together and work together, I think that they'll just keep building on that and doing better as they go along.
I mean, Maid, have you noticed any sort of change in your players from before they, were on this contender stage, especially the ones that you had to kind of go through in open? Was there any sort of extra stress that they've noticed? Do you think that having those extra things are going to make a massive difference once your players get to that point? I mean, obviously in tier 2, it's a little bit difficult to have those resources, but once they become available, do you think it's going to make a massive difference for them?
Yeah, I actually really do think it is. I think it's like something super, super important that's like overlooked a bunch. Obviously, like as you said, it's very hard to have in tier 2 because like I'm working on 0 budget. I don't have like the money to employ. But yeah, very important.
Nice. Right. Let's move on to the next one. Do you think that scrims are really that much different than playing on stage, or is it mostly just like a mental thing?
Yes to both. Like it is a mental thing, but like you're playing in the comfort of your bedroom for one, and then for the stage thing, like you're on a stage in front of hundreds, thousands of people, on stream in front of thousands, hundreds, thousands of people. Like just knowing that and having that in the back of your mind, like every player has a bunch of steps, like mental steps that they'll do leading up to a game to prepare themselves for a game because of how different it is playing an official game in on stage, even if it's not just on stage, online. Like for me, example, I kind of just like meditate and zone myself out, so I don't think. I just think I try not to just think at all about what's about to happen. It's just me in my own head, and that's it. I'm not aware of anything else that's going on. There are other players, like one of the players on my team, he brushes his teeth before every game. That puts him in the right mental state to play a game for some reason. I don't know why it works. Some people will wash their hands. Like everyone has these steps because it's so different from playing a normal scrim. Like, you have to make less mistakes. You know that there's a lot more pressure. You know there's a lot of eyes on you. You know you have to perform. Like there's a lot more at stake.
Maid, thoughts?
I agree. I think like Numlocked's 100% right. I think there's a huge difference between playing a scrim and playing an even when it just like comes down to goals and like how you structure a scrim versus how you structure an official. I don't know what else to say. It's just very different.
Well, we had a comment here from the person that asked the question saying that he meant more in terms of the gameplay itself. Is there a difference in that?
Oh, I think still, yeah, because a lot of, especially people that are newer to competing, will play less aggressively, or they'll make less plays than they normally would because they're scared. They don't want to make the mistake. They don't want to be the person that dies first. They don't want to be the person that waits an ultimate. So they'll be more reserved in their play than they normally would. So it's dangerous in that regard, especially if you're not used to it, that you change your playstyle like that.
I know I'm not a. Oh, sorry, Maid. You go first.
You go.
No, I'm just adding a little bit on the end. I'm not. Coach,
I was going to say, I think like it's also different in that like when I go into like when I set a scrim up, like I have things that I want the players to like work on individually and as a team that don't necessarily correlate with like winning every map or stuff like that. And I don't think you can take like same mentality into an official. Like an official's all about winning and putting everything into focus. So like scrims have a different focus to officials. I'd also agree with sort of like players play differently in that like they get scared or like they don't want to make a mistake in officials and they get into their own head and play differently to how they would in scrims.
TechGirl, what were you gonna say? You were gonna add in like a little tidbit.
I was actually just gonna say, so I've been really lucky because I've starting in South African esports and then being able to come overseas and not just in Overwatch but in a couple of other titles as a chance to sort of be in the tier 2, if you like, and I've had this chance to see players develop, and I think this is what's quite cool about the path to pro as well, because you'll see it as it happens. But I've been able to like meet players who have joined a team and who've never actually competed, and they're super cocky and they're lots of fun and they're giggling and they're telling you how they're going to be the next big thing, and then they go into officials and you kind of see exactly what Numlocked was talking about, a little bit of almost afraid to do anything because they don't want to be the first one to die, and then you see them playing online in tournaments for a while and they get more and more confident and suddenly they're popping off, and then you see them at their first NAN and this kid is white and he looks like he's going to get sick because now he's looking at all these. So there's such a difference, and it's a mental game and it changes all the time as well. So it's obviously like that whole path is what's fun to watch and that journey's to watch. But even then, like competition is always going to be different to practice at the end of the day, I suppose. It's the easiest way to say it.
That is absolutely true. And just the pressure of having people watching you. There are so many things that feel weird when someone watches you. It's like Murphy's Law is a similar thing. Like when something is observed, it goes wrong. you tell somebody this thing doesn't work, and then they're like, okay, show me, and then suddenly it works. It's like you get on stage and suddenly it's been working, and you're like, hey, it's gonna work, and then it doesn't work. That mind game can really cause havoc. So, and I feel for the players as well. They getting onto that stage, especially those that are there for the very first time. They walk up onto that stage, and it can be absolutely terrifying. Let's see. Okay, so the next question is aimed specifically at TechGirl. Do you think another Overwatch League host in South Africa could work?
I don't understand. I saw this question and I still tagged the person in the chat. I don't understand if he's saying, because he's got Overwatch League commas. So like Overwatch hosting a mini league like OWL South Africa, or Overwatch League host as in like a broadcast host? I don't really understand the question. I'm also tired, so maybe that's why, but like I'm super confused.
I don't fully understand the question either. So if whoever asked the question, if you're still around, if you could like elaborate on that. And in the meantime, we'll just move on to the next one. Next one is aimed at Maid. What is your thought process? What kind of thought process do you go through before you pick up a player or new staff?
Player, it's sort of like, do we need this player? How do they fit into the team? Do they have the skills they need? Are they coachable? I'd also say sort of like how long are they going to be with us should also be a concern, because being unsigned does mean you're open to being poached. I wouldn't know anything about that though.
And that kind of brings me to my own kind of question. So if you have like a checklist of things, so you know that you need a DPS player, for example. Now you put it out there, you're looking for a DPS player, you've got these people that you're going to trial. What is your checklist of things that need to be there in order for this player to be considered? You mentioned a couple of things, but like, is that your full like range of things that you feel a player needs to have?
I guess like to add to that, I would add experience. But like I guess like if I'm picking up a player, like firstly I'll sort of like filter out with like the eye test people who don't have like the experience or don't have even the ladder experience. Like I'm not saying I wouldn't pick up someone off ladder, but like you got to have like a level of ability that's shown through sort of like competitive matchmaking. And then sort of like I want to see that player and play. I want to see how they interact and sort of a team experience. I'd sort of get like reference from them. I'd talk to the people who they reference, see how like they apply things. I'd definitely get second opinions from other people as well. There's like a huge amount of work that goes into like picking up a player just like based on like all available information.
Yes. I don't envy your job. Just gonna put that out there. Okay, so we'll just go back to that previous question. So when I read the word host, I read it wrong. I read it in the context of how TechGirl is a host. And no, what they mean is, so we have our local league in inverted commas that's run by VS Gaming being the host. And the person is asking TechGirl, do you believe that there can be another host, another tournament organizer in South Africa?
Okay, I want to make it very clear that when I answer speaking specifically about South Africa. Okay, I do not think when I say this, please, if someone will misquote me and try and say that this is what I said about Europe. It's not the same thing. It's a far more established thing. I don't believe leagues work in South Africa. I don't believe leagues work for Overwatch in South Africa. And the reason I say that is because none of the players are full-time professional Overwatch players. None of them are getting paid. To expect these guys, and the prize money can just not be at the level that it needs to be, and the level of skill is not there to justify prize money where these guys could quit their jobs. So what you're basically asking is a bunch of people who work, who study, who do all of this stuff to commit 2 nights a week to however many months to compete, and then however many nights a week that they have to then commit to practicing and things like that. To ask someone to give up, and it's one of my arguments with the current format that they have in South Africa now, to ask people to give up 2 nights a week to compete and 2-3 nights to train as well. I mean, that's 5 nights. What you end up having and what you see so often in South Africa is that these teams don't last. The players don't last. They're constantly dropping players. It's constantly teams are falling away. long
Mm.
format leagues. And when I say long format leagues, I think anything over a month in South African esports, whether it's Overwatch or anything else, don't work. I've always said this. What we need in the South African scene, and I think what any developing scene needs, is lots of short format tournaments, whether they be a week or 2 weeks, or whether it just be a weekend event with a bunch of matches. I don't think this applies to Europe. I don't think that this is a blanket statement. To make it clear again, I'm saying specifically for South Africa, short format tournaments. So what we actually need in South Africa is tournament organizers to run comps on the weekends. And to this day, I bash my head against a wall. I don't understand. I'm obviously very lucky in South Africa that I've been able to work with a lot of the big brands who sponsor these events. Why none of them are jumping on Overwatch? Because in our country specifically, there is this giant following. There are people watching OWL week in, week out from South Africa. They watch Contenders, and I just don't understand why we keep going back to the tried and tested. I wish someone would take a chance, because I actually think it's one of those games in South Africa we need to build the esports audience more than anything else. And there's so many kids that are playing Overwatch that they're just there. The moment you have a tournament, they'll all be watching and supporting because they play the game themselves. So that's what we need. I don't know how to make it happen. I'm trying. I'm doing some stuff. But
Same.
unfortunately, brands are scared of spending money in a region like ours because the risk for failure is so high. But to answer the question that was asked, no, I don't think we need another. I think we need more weekend tournaments, lots and lots of weekend tournaments online if need be, just every weekend, with the opportunity for casters to cast and to get better, and for hosts to host, and just giving these guys an opportunity to create their own ecosystem, if you like.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Like, what I was lucky when growing up that grassroots esports was still a thing. So like every week there'd be a small online cup for like 20 quid first place prize. Like nothing major, nothing at all. But it was enough to make people want to sign up because there were no known teams signing up for this. It was all just random people, random teams, and they all thought they had a chance of winning it. And it really helped develop like young talent because they'd be turning up to this every week, every single time it was on, and giving it their all. And these were tournaments that would have the last few stages of it casted, and that meant a lot to these players that were trying to make a name for themselves, because that's all you need, like your name to just get out there, and that it's just kind of like a snowball effect. Then, at least back then.
Cool. So, any tournament organizers in South Africa that may be watching, now you know what you need to do. We're going to have our last question before we wrap up for the evening, and that is, and obviously the best people to answer this are going to be specifically Numlocked, but I'm sure that Maid will have some sort of an opinion on it. Is there a huge difference you find when being coached over Skype or Discord in comparison to being done in a team house or in person with the team?
I think so, yeah. You can be a lot more specific about the things you're going over. You can dedicate a lot more time to it, because obviously if you're in a team house, there are no distractions. You can make sure everyone's focused entirely on what it is you're talking about. Make sure everyone is on the same wavelength. No one's confused. You can see how everyone is reacting to the information you're giving them through the coaching session. So I think that just in that regard in general, it's a lot more impactful. Because obviously online there could be heaps of things going on. People kind of doing their own thing, chatting to other people after the game. Yeah, and that's obviously not so good.
Well, that's the player perspective. So, as a coach, Maid, I don't know if you've done any one-on-one coaching in person, but how do you feel? Like, how effective is Discord as a coaching tool?
I mean, if you're not doing it in person, you kind of have to do it over Discord. But I feel like doing it in person is way more effective. I would kill to be in the position where I could coach in person and beat the team.
See, hear that, Overwatch League teams? Maid would like to do some in-person coaching for your teams. Anyway. So yeah, thanks guys. I think we've covered some really cool topics here, and obviously for myself, really exciting to talk about the South African scene. It's something that's really close to my heart, something that I've been doing a lot of work in, and I know TechGirl has been doing the same. A bunch of South Africans in the chat this evening that have been really coming through with their questions and their comments and really trying to get involved. So that makes me really happy. And it was cool because this was a really diverse episode. We had TechGirl and I from South Africa, Maid all the way from Australia, and of course Numlocked sitting in the UK. So really happy that you guys could all join me this evening, and I hope you all enjoyed yourselves as much as I did. This has been a lot of fun. We will put all of that information about the upcoming South African tournaments in the comments or in the description for the YouTube VOD when it goes live. Thanks again, everybody, for joining, and yeah, have a good evening.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I want to give out a spoiler because I'm busy watching Leg Day play. What is that game? Because that doesn't look like it's Blizzard sanctioned. Is that Assassin's Creed Odyssey? What? What? Someone put that on the Overwatch TMZ. Leg Day's music, Assassin's Creed.
That's hard. That's a hard yikes.
Leaked. Cool. Thanks again, guys. Next episode will be in 2 weeks. We will be announcing that, so watch our Twitter. Thanks again for joining, and have a good evening.
Thanks.
No worries.